Russian special forces bedding down in occupied Donetsk, probably thinking the dangerous part of the day was over, when Ukrainian drones came in and turned a temporary command site into a casualty report. Ukrainian reporting tied that December 26, 2025 strike to Madyar Birds and said it killed 51 Russian servicemen and wounded 74 more at a GRU deployment site in Berdyanska. And that is the part people still do not quite understand about this unit. Madyar Birds are not terrifying because they have cool footage. Half the internet has cool footage. What matters is whether a drone unit can keep showing up in the places Russia needs to feel safe. Fuel points, command sites, air defenses, launch areas, logistics hubs, places that are supposed to sit behind the real fight. That is where this gets ugly for Russia, because once those places start dying too, the front line stops being a wall and starts becoming a patient on life support. And in 2026, Madyar Birds have not slowed down. They stayed highly active through March and April, with reporting linking them and the wider unmanned systems forces to strikes on Russian logistics, air defense systems, UAV positions, and fuel infrastructure in occupied territory and Crimea. Ukrainian officials also singled drone formations out as the force that has, for 4 straight months, been neutralizing Russian manpower faster than Russia replaces it. The 414th Brigade was specifically highlighted for suppressing Russian UAV landing sites. So this video is not really about the history of Madyar Birds. This is about what they are doing right now that is quietly shredding the machinery Russia needs to keep this war going. Not in theory, not on a future wish list, now. Because in March, Ukrainian reporting said the brigade's operators were involved in hitting 4 enemy Rubicon facilities in occupied territory. One of those targets was a fuel train. Another was an S-300V launcher. Then came a logistics hub and an ammunition depot. Read that again and you start to see the shape of the problem. This was not one flashy strike picked for headlines. That target set looks like someone went down the Russian system and started removing the screws. That matters for a very simple reason. Russia can survive losing a vehicle. Russia can survive losing a trench. Russia can even survive losing a town for a while. Because Moscow is perfectly willing to spend lives the way normal countries spend printer ink. What gets harder to survive is a battlefield where the fuel train burns before it unloads. The air defense launcher disappears before it can cover the route, and the ammunition dump goes up before the artillery schedule catches up. Then a couple of weeks later, the pattern tightened. On March 26th, reporting said Madyar Birds, working with Ukraine's Deep Strike Center, destroyed a Russian Tor air defense system in Luhansk Oblast. For Russia, that is not a cosmetic loss. A Tor exists to protect other assets from exactly the kind of low-altitude threat Ukraine now throws around in industrial quantities. When a drone unit starts killing the systems designed to stop drones, that is not just battlefield damage. That is a very rude joke at the enemy's expense. Russia's official response was probably a press release explaining the Tor was not destroyed. It was relocated to a more strategic position, somewhere underwater. And then April arrived and the target list widened again. On April 7th and 8th, reports linked Madyar Birds to the strike on the marine oil terminal in Feodosia, Crimea. Separate reporting also tied the brigade to a hit on an S-400 radar component in the same broader area. Fuel terminals and air defense nodes are not the kind of things you hit because they look good in a telegram clip. You hit them because they support movement, storage, protection, and sustainment. In plain English, they help Russia keep the war supplied and covered. This is where a lot of people watching from the outside still get fooled. They see drones and think cheap little flying grenade. That was the old version. What Ukraine has been building is much nastier than that. This is a campaign logic. One strike kills a launcher, another burns fuel, a third suppresses Russian UAV sites, a fourth forces the enemy to move farther, hide harder, disperse more, and spend more time solving the rear area chaos instead of shaping the front. Nothing about that is random. It is pressure engineering. And Madyar Birds keep showing up in exactly the places that make that pressure cumulative. On April 8th, Ukrainian coverage highlighted the brigade for systematically suppressing Russian UAV landing sites. That sounds technical, almost boring, which usually means it is important. Because killing drone launch and landing infrastructure is not just about one machine. It reaches into reconnaissance, correction for artillery, local surveillance, and the enemy's ability to keep its own drone screen alive. You are not only swatting at the hornets anymore, you are stepping on the nest. A lot of battlefield innovations look clever for 6 weeks and then disappear into the military equivalent of a garage full of failed exercise equipment. This one did not disappear, it scaled. Reuters, AP, and other recent reporting all point to European states pouring money into Ukrainian drone production and joint development because the battlefield is proving that unmanned systems are no longer a side dish. They are becoming the meal. Moscow knows that too, which is exactly why Russian officials have been publicly warning that Europe's drone cooperation with Ukraine is dragging the continent deeper into the war. States do not issue those warnings when they think the threat is decorative, and here is what that actually means at scale. Systems do not collapse because one thing breaks. They collapse when enough critical places stop feeling routine and start feeling exposed. Madyar's birds are not attacking the front. They are attacking the feeling of safety behind it. And the truly dangerous part is that this is still evolving. Because once a drone unit proves it can hit manpower, air defense, fuel, logistics, and UAV infrastructure in one campaign rhythm, the next question is not whether it can keep hurting Russia. The next question is whether Russia can still protect the specific parts of its war machine that hold the whole front together. Russia's counters to all of this look fine on a briefing slide. The problem is what those counters actually cost the units on the ground. Suddenly, the artillery unit still exists, but it behaves like a man trying to run a marathon in borrowed shoes. That is why the Tor kill in Luhansk mattered beyond the explosion itself. A Tor is not just another Russian vehicle with an unfortunate future. It is part of the layer that is supposed to make the sky less friendly for Ukrainian drones and missiles. When Madyar's Birds in the Deep Strike Center took one out in late March, they were not simply removing metal from a map square. They were thinning a protective layer that other Russian assets rely on, which means every truck, radar, launcher, and staging point nearby starts feeling the breeze in a very unpleasant way. And once that happens, Russian commanders get dragged into the worst kind of military math, not the exciting kind with arrows on a map and men in clean uniforms pointing at screens. The ugly kind. How far back can you push critical equipment before it stops being useful? How many decoys do you need before the decoys themselves become a supply burden? At some point, you are building a fake army to protect your real army, and both of them are running low on fuel. How many crews can you rotate through a position that everybody knows is being watched? How many times can you tell people everything is under control before the phrase starts sounding like a hostage video? That is where drone warfare gets mean. It forces the other side to spend time solving a geometry problem while under attack. Then there is the fuel problem, which is where this starts getting really ugly for Russia. Those fuel strikes in March and April were not chosen for optics. Unglamorous targets are usually the first clue something matters a lot. Nobody makes heroic posters about diesel, yet armies would become deeply philosophical for about 6 minutes without it and then stop moving. Hit fuel and you do not just damage a stockpile. You tamper with tempo. You make movement less casual. You make resupply more deliberate. You turn every kilometer into an argument. And you can see the modern battlefield logic in that target choice. A fuel train means bulk movement. An oil terminal means storage and throughput. A logistics hub means sorting, staging, and onward flow. Take those together and the picture gets clearer. This is not a unit wandering around looking for lucky shots. This is a formation operating inside a wider campaign that keeps asking the same cold question. Which part of the Russian machine creates the most downstream trouble if it disappears tonight? That is also why older ideas about battlefield depth are getting battered. For a long time, armies treated distance as a kind of comfort blanket. Put something far enough behind the line and it starts to feel safer, more administrative, more protected by sheer geography. Drones have been eating that illusion piece by piece, and units like Madyar Birds are among the reasons. The farther back Russia places something valuable, the more it may reduce immediate risk, but the more it slows the front. Bring it closer and the risk climbs again. That is not a stable balance. That is a tax on every decision. Russian drone teams do not just produce dramatic footage for Telegram. They scout, they adjust artillery, they watch roads, they help detect movement, they extend the eyes of nearby units. So, when those sites start taking regular pressure, Russia is not merely losing a few machines. It is losing local confidence in its own picture of the battlefield. And armies that cannot see properly start doing very old, very stupid things. This is where drone war stops being about single strikes and becomes something uglier, blinding, interrupting, and systematically thinning the enemy's ability to see its own battlefield. It is less cinematic, it is more corrosive, and none of this is running on improvisation anymore. Ukraine has been scaling drone production at a pace that would have looked like a bad PowerPoint projection 2 years ago. In 2024, Ukrainian officials reported producing over 1 million FPV drones domestically. Read that number again, 1 million, in a country actively being bombed. By 2025, that figure was climbing further, with defense ministry targets pushing toward 2 million units annually, and European partners co-funding production lines inside Ukraine itself. That matters for a specific reason. The early version of this war had Ukraine scrounging for components, modifying commercial drones, and improvising at every level. That version is over. What replaced it is an industrial logic. Domestic factories, standardized designs, dedicated fiber optic variants for jamming-resistant strikes, and specialized formations like the 414th built to use that output systematically rather than opportunistically. Russia has noticed. Its electronic warfare spending has increased significantly, its jamming systems have gotten more sophisticated, and its drone interception tactics have evolved. None of that is cheap. None of that was in the original budget. Every ruble Moscow spends hardening its rear areas against Ukrainian drones is a ruble that is not going toward artillery shells, vehicle maintenance, or the infantry replacements it is burning through at a rate that would embarrass a Soviet-era planner. That is the second-order cost nobody puts in the headline. The first-order cost is the Tor launcher, the fuel train, the command site. That is the damage report. The second-order cost is what Russia has to spend, restructure, and sacrifice just to make those attacks slightly less catastrophic next time. And Ukraine keeps updating the threat faster than Russia updates the defense. Fiber optic FPV drones, the kind the 414th has been using, are guided by a physical cable rather than a radio signal, which means jamming does not work on them at all. Russia spent considerable resources developing electronic warfare systems specifically to counter Ukrainian FPV drones. Fiber optic variants make that investment partially obsolete. Ukraine did not wait for Russia to solve the jamming problem. It made jamming irrelevant for a category of strike that is now showing up against armored vehicles, command posts, and air defense systems. That is not adaptation. That is a moving target. And a moving target is much harder to brief your way out of than a fixed threat, which is why the people whose job it is to prepare for the next war are paying very close attention. Mark Rutte said in April that Ukraine is among the most advanced countries in drone and counter-drone technology, and that the alliance is learning from those battlefield lessons. British Minister Al Carnes also described Ukraine's expertise as part of a revolution in military affairs. That language matters. Officials do not use phrases like that because they were impressed by some edited strike montage on social media. They use them when they think a change in warfare has already arrived and everyone else is late to class. The methods being tested against Russia are not frozen in one unit or 1 month. They are being observed, copied, and industrialized. Russia is not only fighting drones, it is fighting a learning process. That is why Moscow keeps complaining that Europe's support for Ukrainian drone development drags the continent deeper into the war. Complaints like that are not made because something is symbolic. They are made because something is becoming durable. There is also a human side to all this that never shows up on the map. A Russian crew positioned near a fuel point does not need to be struck to become less effective. They just need to believe they could be. That belief changes everything about how they work. They stop parking in the obvious spot and start arguing about which tree line looks better. They keep the engine running longer than they should because a cold start feels like a noise that gets you killed. They skip the full maintenance check because standing next to the vehicle for 40 minutes feels like holding up a sign. They move the camouflage net 3 times and it still does not feel right. They eat faster. They sleep in shifts nobody agreed to. They stop using the radio unless they absolutely have to. And then they keep it short, and then they wonder if short was still too long. None of that shows up in a damage report. But it shows up in response times. It shows up in maintenance failures 2 weeks later. It shows up when a commander asks why a unit that was not hit is somehow performing like one that was. Fear has terrible staff work. Remember Berdiansky, December 26th, 51 dead, 74 wounded, GRU command site gone overnight. That was not the brigade getting lucky. That was the brigade doing on purpose what most units cannot do by accident. If Ukrainian reporting is broadly accurate, that operation produced triple-digit casualties in a single night. That tells you the unit can hurt personnel concentrations in ways that ripple beyond the tactical moment. Lose the wrong command group, the wrong specialist, the wrong node of planners and coordinators, and the downstream effects keep showing up long after the smoke clears. A dead radar matters. A dead operations team can matter even more. One of Ukraine's best-known unmanned formations keeps participating in a wider campaign that chips away at the stuff Russia needs to see, move, protect, coordinate, and resupply. That is a much nastier sentence for Moscow, because all 5 of those functions have to work together. Once they start fraying at the same time, battlefield pressure stops feeling local and starts feeling structural. The trouble is that each answer comes with a cost. Jamming can interfere with your own systems. Dispersal makes coordination harder. Camouflage slows routines. Pulling assets farther back stretches supply. Counter-drone teams need manpower. Russia is already burning through faster than it replaces. That is why these drone campaigns matter. They force trade-offs, and trade-offs are where armies start paying interest on earlier mistakes. Because the scariest thing Madyar's Birds may be doing right now is not killing Russian soldiers. It is teaching the battlefield to betray them.